Most people in the West have a distorted view of China. What they perceive is a stereotype communism, authoritarianism, a regime that contradicts everything liberal democracy stands for. This narrow perspective leads to a dangerous assumption that China's system must be weak, illegitimate, or bound to crumble. But if you're viewing the world through that limited framework, you're missing what's really unfolding right in front of you. To truly grasp modern China, you can't just examine the 70 years since the Communist Party took power. You need to reach back 2,000 years into Chinese history. You need to comprehend the fundamental operating system I refer to as the emperor strategy. Every empire follows a predictable trajectory. It starts with the establishment of a new order, climbs toward prosperity, hits a pinnacle marked by excess and mounting debt, then slides into chaos and decline. Right now, the United States displays many hallmarks of a late-stage empire caught in this very cycle. We're wealthy, yes, but we're drowning in debt. We hold power, but we're fractured internally and consuming far more than we're producing. China, on the other hand, is ascending. And the blueprint they're following to fuel that ascent isn't borrowed from Soviet doctrine. It's a distinctly Chinese fusion that weaves together three core philosophies: Confucianism, legalism, and Marxism. If you don't grasp Confucianism, you can't understand the emperor. Western societies place the individual at the center. The person is the fundamental building block. In China, that building block is the family. Confucian thought views the entire nation as one extended family. The emperor serves as the patriarch. The arrangement is straightforward. The patriarch wields total authority, but he also bears total responsibility for the family's welfare. As long as he provides stability and prosperity, what they call the mandate of heaven, the family respects his rule. This pairs with legalism, an ancient philosophy arguing that humans are driven by self-interest and need firm guidance through rewards and punishments administered by a powerful central government. When you merge these concepts, you create a system that's hierarchical, centralized, and remarkably effective at marshaling resources. It's a framework built for unity. During the rising phase of the big cycle, unity becomes a nation's most precious commodity. You need to construct infrastructure and educate hundreds of millions. You need to postpone immediate gratification to invest in the future. The emperor's strategy enables China to act with a speed and clarity of vision that a fragmented, polarized democracy simply can't replicate. While we in the US are debating what projects to pursue, China has already laid the foundation. This isn't about endorsing their approach, it's about acknowledging that at this specific stage of development, when power is being rapidly consolidated, their machinery is running at maximum efficiency, and it's delivering results. Now let's examine how this system manages wealth and authority. This is where the confusion really sets in. People constantly ask me, Ray, is China communist or capitalist? The truth is, it's state capitalist. In America, we trust in the invisible hand. We believe capital allocation should be market-driven. If investors want to pour billions into social media platforms and complex financial instruments, that's where the money flows. We think this produces optimal efficiency. China runs on the emperor model of the visible hand. They harness markets to generate efficiency, but the state maintains control over the economy's critical sectors. The state owns the banks and regulates the flow of credit. Why does this matter? Because it gives them the power to steer the big cycle. Consider the 2008 financial crisis. In the West, the credit system seized up. Our recovery dragged on because governments had to negotiate with the private sector and legislative bodies to inject stimulus. Deleveraging took years. In China, the leadership simply recognized the contraction and directed the state-owned banks to lend. They didn't negotiate, they commanded. Money immediately flooded into high-speed rail networks, urban development, and technology infrastructure. They yanked their economy out of freefall by decree. This capacity to direct capital is their secret weapon in the technology race. The emperor surveys the global landscape and asks what technologies will shape the next century. They identify semiconductors, renewable energy, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence as the future. So they don't wait for venture capitalists to catch on. They mobilize the entire state apparatus, subsidies, tax incentives, university research programs, state bank financing to dominate those industries. In my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, I demonstrate how the Dutch and British employed similar coordination between government and trading companies like the East India Company during their rise to power. China's doing the exact same thing. They're treating their corporations, Huawei, BYD, Tencent, not merely as profit-generating entities but as national champions in a geopolitical competition. The emperor's strategy views the economy as an instrument of national strength, not just a vehicle for personal enrichment. When they launched an aggressive regulatory crackdown between late 2020 and 2021, targeting their own tech billionaires in the private tutoring industry, Western investors were shocked. They said this is uninvestable, they're destroying shareholder value. But they weren't destroying value, they were rechanneling it. The leadership determined that video games and private education weren't contributing to social stability or long-term national strength, so they shut those sectors down and redirected that capital elsewhere. To a Western capitalist, this seems outrageous. To a legalist emperor, it's essential pruning to ensure healthy growth. Adiensi Kuamenti. This centralized control sounds efficient, but isn't it dangerous to give one entity that much power over the economy? Now we need to address the darker dimensions. We need to discuss why this system is so inflexible. If you study Chinese history the way I have, you'll notice a recurring pattern that spans millennia, periods of unity alternating with episodes of catastrophic destruction. They call these the warring states periods. In the United States, the worst scenarios we imagine are economic recessions or incompetent presidents. In China, the collective memory is haunted by eras when central authority disintegrated and millions perished in the ensuing anarchy. The emperor's strategy is fundamentally a defensive mechanism against this chaos. In the big cycle, a nation's strength depends on its internal cohesion. Stage 1, a strong leader consolidates authority and establishes institutions. Stage 2, those institutions function, and the country thrives. Stage 3, success breeds complacency and equality widens. Stage 4, internal cohesion becomes fragile. China is currently navigating the transition from the explosive growth of Stage 2 to the stability required in Stage 3. They're intensely focused on preventing the kind of internal breakdown that has historically led to collapse. This explains their aggressive approach to social control. To the emperor, political division isn't a sign of democratic health, it's a disease. They observe the United States today, where opposing political factions genuinely despise each other, where every election feels apocalyptic, where dysfunction prevents basic infrastructure maintenance, and they conclude that's a failing system. They believe their top-down model provides a strategic edge in a competitive world. They're wagering that a benevolent autocracy, meritocratic yet strict, can produce better outcomes for the majority than a paralyzed democracy. And the evidence so far is complex but noteworthy. They've pulled 800 million people out of extreme poverty. They've increased life expectancy faster than any major nation in recorded history. They've accomplished this by maintaining rigid internal discipline. But the price is steep. The price is restricted freedom. The price is a system that can't tolerate opposition because it views any dissent as the first fracture in the dam holding back chaos. In the big cycle, strict internal order typically delivers enormous advantages during an empire's early phases. The military is disciplined. The workforce is coordinated. But as an empire matures, that same discipline can become suffocating. So they've achieved economic miracles, but at what cost to individual liberty and human rights? This brings me to the vulnerabilities. No system is flawless. The emperor strategy suits the current phase of the big cycle, but it contains a fatal weakness that has toppled nearly every Chinese dynasty throughout history. The weakness is the bad emperor problem. In the American system, our chaos is also our safety mechanism. If a leader makes catastrophic errors, the media exposes him, the judiciary restrains him, or the electorate removes him. We have built-in correction mechanisms. In the Chinese system, there are no institutional checks. The emperor holds absolute authority. If he's brilliant like Deng Xiaoping, the nation soars. But if he becomes isolated, surrounds himself with yes-men, or grows paranoid, he can steer the nation toward disaster with no one capable of stopping him. We're witnessing this stress test unfold right now. As China's economy grows more sophisticated, top-down management becomes increasingly difficult. You can command a factory to produce steel, but you can't command an entrepreneur to be innovative. You can't command consumers to feel economically confident. The emperor model struggles when an economy transitions from copying to creating. Innovation demands freedom. It requires the ability to challenge conventions. Can a system obsessed with maintaining control permit the freedom necessary to win the technology competition? That's the trillion-dollar question. So, where are we headed? We're entering the most perilous phase of the big cycle. We have an established power, the US, in decline, showing symptoms of internal disorder. We have an ascending power, China, deploying a highly coordinated, top-down emperor strategy to challenge that dominance. History shows us, through British warnings and Dutch experiences, that when these two systems collide, the one with stronger fundamentals typically prevails. China is betting their system of state capitalism and enforced unity is better equipped for the brutal realities of the 21st century. The United States is betting that its tradition of individual liberty and grassroots reinvention will prove resilient once again, just as it did in the 20th century against the Soviet Union. But don't fall into the trap of assuming China's failure is inevitable. Don't make the mistake of dismissing their system as irrational. It's a finely calibrated machine with 2,000 years of refinement behind it. If we want to remain competitive, we can't just critique their machinery. We have to repair our own. We need to honestly assess our own internal cohesion, our debt levels, our education systems, our civic discourse, and ask whether our machinery still functions properly. Udai NC come NT. So the real question isn't just whether China will succeed, it's whether America can fix itself in time to compete effectively. Because in the big cycle, the universe doesn't judge your ideology, it only measures your